Right now, it's time to welcome our 3PL expert and host of Check Call. We've got Mary O'Connell with us today. Mary, thank you for joining us.
Anytime. Thank you for having me, guys.
And let's start off with a topic that I think is relevant to most of us here in the 21st century. Nobody likes getting ghosted, but we're not talking dating. We're talking about shipper-carrier 3PL relationships. Let's dig into that a little bit.
So it's becoming increasingly common, as it is in the dating world, that in 2022 and 2021, et cetera, that ghosting is a very common problem. So that could literally be anything from drivers. You give them a load, they're past their background, they have great credit, they don't have any carrier 411 problems, and then you go to do a check call on them, and then they're like, radio silence. You're just like, awesome, cool. Hopefully it'll get there. Hopefully, yeah, everything is fine. But then some, of course, those are always a load that your shipper is like, I have a question and you need to talk to the driver, et cetera, et cetera. And so then you have to call him and then the driver does not answer. And you're just left going, okay, well, the shipper needs something and the driver is not answering. So how do I get the driver to answer? There's a method that you cannot use very often, but it is effective. It's what I fondly like to refer to as Grace Sharkey has also named it the crazy ex-girlfriend method. And it's basically you call the driver incessantly. Like you literally call, he sends you to voicemail, hang up, call again. Keep going until he will answer. Works 100% of the time. The driver will probably be really pissed off when he answers the phone, but it works. Sometimes you just got to commit to like 10 minutes worth of time. So it's something that, you can do to get hold of a driver, but ultimately you should kind of avoid if you can, just because it's a lot of wasted time on your part and the driver's part. But also the same thing can happen on the shipper side, where you go through an RFP, you complete the process, and then they're like, oh, we're going to give you like $20,000 of freight on this lane, and you're going to have 7 loads a week and all that. And then as you start going, you might get 1 load a week, 2 loads a week, back to 1. So it's something like that where it's not quite what it's promised, but because of RFP, there's not like a contractual amount of like volume. It's just, hey, this is what we think is going to happen. Good luck. And then you have to kind of go back to that shipper and be like, hey, the reason I got these rates from the carrier was because of this high volume, and now we're not getting it. So like your rates are going to have to go back up unless you can get this volume. And it just kind of becomes a nightmare that you just kind of have to wade through and figure out as you work with your shipper. And hopefully there was just a oopsie or a delay in production that worked for them. But unfortunately, more times than not, it's a shipper that was like, oh yeah, the volumes might not be right. And you kind of have to work with them to get those volumes, to get the accurate volumes, so you can then in turn help the carriers get the rates that they need to run those lanes in a successful way.
So, Mary, keeping on the dating-ish theme here with ghosting, which I've never ghosted. It's so rude, right? But people that usually do it because there is just so much volume, so many options, and so they can really kind of have their pick and choose of like, not interested, better option came along. Do you see this really kind of happening as just a quantity that's been surging throughout the supply chain throughout the pandemic has really, really ramped up the potential ghosting within the freight and supply chain world? And as we start to see volumes come down, do we see that relationship kind of start to switch a little bit here?
I want to say yes, that as the volumes come down, for like shippers and other people will potentially be a little bit more honest and forthright with it. This problem with shippers and their volumes have been around for longer than the pandemic. It's been around for a while. It's just become more and more common lately as there are so many other options. And as there are so many supply chain interruptions, as we all well know and love. So like sometimes there truly is a problem where like, oh, our shipment for creating this good did not come in time, so we are kind of left to scramble, and we might not have that volume. I would say that that's probably not the most common occurrence of that. I would say that it's just they may have underestimated their shipment volume, or who knows, a multitude of other reasons. I do think that as we start to come back and things slow down in the transportation world, the shippers who do things like that will kind of start to develop a reputation, and everyone will know, like, all right, well, this shipper has ghosted me 3 times in the past or has not delivered on the freight that they promised that they had. So we're going to not give them the best rate. So that way we protect ourselves as well as our carriers, just because that way the individual brokers and the 3PLs, they're not having to sit there and like twiddle their thumbs and go, well, cool, I was supposed to have 7 loads a week and I like worked with this carrier to have all these trucks available for them, and now I have nothing. So I think that as shippers continue to do that, we would see some of the rates, the contracted rates with those shippers, rise to kind of reflect their poor behavior, which if only that was the way in the dating world. You could just kind of have a thing about this person, like this person's ghosted someone 6 times, and you're like, cool, I'll pass.
Maybe that's a suggestion for like the metaverse, right? Is that you like you match with somebody on a dating app and you're like, oh, 18 ghosts? Maybe not. But let's talk about how kind of both like in the dating world and in the business world specifically, a lot of this can be avoided with relationship management techniques, right? When you're setting up and expectation management techniques too. And I almost feel like sometimes shippers or carriers are almost kind of afraid to set those hard limits and say, you know what, no, I can't give you this promise on delivery, because they want to give you as much as they possibly can. And they almost kind of see it as a safer route to say, oh no, I overestimated myself or I underestimated myself, so let's just cut off the connection instead of admitting to the mistake. So can you talk a little bit about how you can set up those expectation management conversations at the start of doing business and why that's helpful at the end point?
Oh, 100%. It has been something that I have been shouting from as many rooftops that will let me shout from it, that being open and honest with both your carrier and your shipper is the number one important thing. Like, yes, problems happen. It's the nature of what we do. There's going to be a problem. Freight's going to get loaded on the wrong trailer. The wrong person's going to pick up the wrong load. It's just going to happen. So the biggest thing that you can do is, if a problem happens, turn around, call that shipper, call that carrier and say, hey, we have a problem. Give me 5 minutes to fix it. Because if you get ahead of that problem and you say like, hey, this is a problem, this is what's going on, starting off with that open and honest communication, regardless of how uncomfortable it is going to help you in the long term. Because if you hide it from your shipper and they find out that like, oh, something happened, then they're like, well, what else has happened that you haven't told me? And then you kind of start breaking that trust. And then when another 3PL comes in or a competition comes in and is like, we can do it better than them, they're like, well, maybe this one won't lie to me. It's just important to start with that open and honest communication and make sure that, you know, you're being forthright and honest. You're picking carriers that are, you're picking shippers that are also willing to communicate. It's just, you can never really over communicate what's happening, whether or not you send an email in to avoid that someone just deletes and goes, this man is obsessed with emailing me. And it's better to have something like that where your shipper knows exactly what's going on. I'm not saying for every load that like John was the driver, he picked up at 1:20, he is loaded with this amount of product and he's on his way. That might be a bit excessive, but some shippers love that. Like, there are some customers that like, I want to know every detail of everything. And our others are just like, yeah, let me know if he's not going to deliver on time. That's all we care about. So it's just about knowing that shipper, setting those expectations of like, what do you want your communication to look like? Do you want a notice every day and who your driver is, what color hair he has and what t-shirt he's wearing? Or do you just want to know if he's not going to deliver on time? And how do you want to best know that? It's kind of something like that where it's important to set those standards of communication early and to just make sure everybody is working together.
Mary, I think that's a great point. Everyone's going to have different preferences depending on what company they are, what they kind of want to get out of it. So if people want to check out more of your content, where can they go? Where can they find you?
You can find the episodes of Check Call the podcast that come out every Tuesday at 12:30 Eastern on Freightwaves Now, just like this, or Freightwaves TV, I'm sorry. And then you can also, the newsletter comes out every Tuesday and Thursday. You can subscribe on freightwaves.com/check call. You can find me on LinkedIn, or you can find me on Twitter as Mary O_119.
Awesome, Mary. Thank you so much for joining us today. We'll catch you tomorrow afternoon on Check Call for your episode, and have a great rest of your day.
Bye, guys. Thank you.